So it is a little after 1. Senator Sherman, you want to lead us in the pledge? Welcome, Department of Transportation to Transportation Committee in the Senate. So I've asked, for all of you, I've asked DOT to come in and give us kind of an update on the 10-year plan, because if it's not here already, it will be coming shortly, because I think they passed it in the House. So with that, welcome.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Victoria Sheehan, Commissioner for the Department of Transportation, and with me today is Pete Stamnus, who's our Director of Project Development. Pete has led the development of the 10-year plan, and so he'll be presenting a lot of the information today. And then also with us to represent the department, Assistant Commissioner Bill Cass, who is known to many of you, Glenn Davison, who actually is the project manager. He's the one that crunches all the numbers and pulls everything together to develop the 10-year plan. And then Kathy Mulcahy-Hampson, who's our legislative liaison. So today we have a brief presentation. We are open to taking questions as we go through the materials, so that way we can address any particular issues or concerns that you might have. But of course, we are more than willing to come back at other times and dive into any of the details. This is a multimodal transportation plan, so we'll talk to you today about the funding for all the different types of transportation investment, and specifically explain how the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IIJA, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, it's kind of known by both names. The administration is calling it Bill, the Bipartisan Law, but the actual title of the piece of legislation was the IIJA. So we'll talk to you about what funding that provides to the state of New Hampshire compared to what we had assumed in the development of the last 10-year plan. So you have that sense of what additional capacity we now have as a result of the passage of the bill. And then the one thing I did want to mention before we dig into all the details, while the federal bill was passed at the end of last year, many of the programs are new programs, and so Federal Highway and US DOT has been sending out guidance as it's ready for the various programs, and so there's still pieces that we are beginning to understand and we don't have all the details on. The other thing that has delayed the implementation to some degree is Congress had not passed a full appropriations bill, so while the IIJA was the authorizing bill, until they passed a budget, we weren't able to start spending all of the money that was anticipated in the first year of the IIJA. And that has further delayed even Federal Highway in releasing some of the guidance, because they couldn't start working on the new programs and guidance until the budget was passed. So while we know a lot more today than we did when we were working with Gasset and the Executive Council in the first phase of the 10-year plan, in the coming weeks, it's likely that we'll be receiving additional information and fine-tuning the plan as we learn the specifics of all the federal programs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete, and he can explain the 10-year plan process and start to walk you through the presentation. But please stop us at any time, and if there's questions that Pete and I aren't able to address, we have the rest of the team behind us who can also provide additional information.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. So we assembled a package for you today. This is the current draft of the 10-year plan. We've also included the bill language as amended by the House in your package. There is a larger scale rainbow chart that's included not only in the presentation but also in the 10-year plan book. So maybe as we go through the presentation, there are numbers that you'll see here, this is a little bit easy to read, it's a little larger font, so this has been helpful in past presentations in other venues. There's the very important acronym list. So we give you a large list, and this grows as we do more and more of these and find new acronyms that we like to use. So that's included in your package. And there's also a table, a change table that looks like this, and we track the changes as the draft moves through the process. And so this is an accounting of from a previous 10-year plan through the gasset process and also through the House. So that's and it's organized in a way that makes sense to us, and we can touch on this if you want. But it's a good document to track the changes from the beginning of the process. And the presentation that I'll be walking you through this afternoon. And again, as I go through this, if there are any questions, we would be happy to just answer them on the spot instead of waiting to the end. It'll be the easiest, I believe. So, again, thanks for having us. The presentation's about 24 slides long, so it should go fairly quickly. And the basic topics that we're going to talk about on the second slide here is the process itself, the 10-year plan process. The bill funding, that the new reauthorization, how it's affected the programs and some of the strategies that we used in order to load the draft the 10-year plan itself and the changes that we made in the plan. And there's a number of projects that we had many discussions on through the hearing process. That we want to just make you aware of and where they stand currently in the draft as it stands today. So on page 3, the 10-year plan process, this graphic here, we begin, it's a 2-year process. So in the summer and fall of the even years, in this case 2020, we began the Regional Planning Commission phase of the 10-year plan. So there's meetings to identify how projects would be prioritized. The Regional Planning Commissions reach out to their communities and identify potential projects. They get ranked and scored. They get submitted to DOT initially in the winter, December, January timeframe. And at that point, we look at them to make sure that the scope of the work in the project and the costs associated with that, the estimated costs, are in alignment. Many times they're out of alignment. So we take a look at that so that we can start off on a good footing if it does make it into the plan. We make our comments, we get it back to the regional planning commissions, and then in the spring, in this case the spring of 2021, they've submitted their regional priorities to us for consideration and inclusion into the 10-year plan. From there, we move on to the gasset phase. And Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation, made up of the 5 executive counselors and the commissioner of the DOT. And we begin with meetings in the summer. We have some organizational meetings. We recommend some strategies for development of the update of the draft 10-year plan. We developed a draft, an initial draft for the plan, and we bring that out to the public. And there are a number of hearings. So we have a slide in here. We went 23 public hearings all across the state and in each of the executive counselor districts. From there, we meet again after the conclusion of all the hearings. We make updates based on the input that we've received. We come up with a modified version of the draft, and it goes from there to the governor and the legislature. Generally, it needs to go to the governor in December, and that happened in mid-December. Pass it on to the House in January. We've had a number of additional one hearing and multiple work sessions with them, and now we're here in the Senate phase. Ultimately, it concludes with signing coming out of the Senate and the votes there, and it goes to the governor for signing into law in June of this year. So 2-year process, and then soon after that, we'll begin the update of the next 10-year plan. And this one covers the years of 2023 through 2032. So next slide, page 4. So as we entered the Gasset phase, we were aware. We had some basic strategies in order to develop the update of the 10-year plan, the draft itself. And we wanted to, so one of those strategies was we wanted to fund the regional priority projects. So those are the projects that I had mentioned previously that were submitted by the regional planning commissions. And we allocated $50 million in the outer 2 years of the plan for regional planning priority projects. So it's $25 million per year. We wanted to fund those regional planning priority projects. We also wanted to focus on the maintenance and preservation of the existing network of roads and bridges. So that's worked well for us, and we wanted to continue to do that. Continue to invest in the core system programs and build on our successes in road and bridge conditions overall statewide. That includes investment in the pavement and bridge preservation programs, redless bridge investments, and also our roadside assets like culverts, pavement marking signs, and guardrail. And we knew that a new reauthorization bill was in the works, and we knew that there was going to be more money. We just didn't know how much money it was, but we wanted to come up with a strategy in how we would utilize those funds and prioritize our approach. And these bullets in the last item here really look at accelerating existing 10-year plan projects where we could. Fully funding existing 10-year plan projects. So there were a number of projects that we had shrunk the scope of projects because of the funding restrictions that we had. And so we wanted to assign more funding to existing projects that we did have that we knew could utilize more money. We had a number of projects that were funded with Garvey bonds. And so our strategy was to convert the Garvey bonded projects to use federal funds. The new federal funds that we were receiving, we just did that conversion was as a strategy. We wanted to inflate some of our the programs. Our general programs don't get inflated, and we lose the buying power over time. So with these additional funds, we've inflated the outer years to try to keep up with the pace of the cost of doing business. And lastly, we would consider adding new projects in the outer years to improve safety and capacity. So it was more focused on existing projects, accelerating existing projects, fully funding existing projects, and then making room at the back end of the plan to add new projects, because it takes a long time to develop those projects and deliver them to construction. So that was the basic strategy that we had coming into the plan.
So just one thing to emphasize from a timing perspective. So a lot of work was being done on a traditional transportation reauthorization bill. And so even when we prepared the draft 10-year plan in the summertime, we had forecast an increase in federal funds. As Pete said, we didn't know how much more money exactly we would get. I don't think any of us anticipated necessarily an infrastructure bill of the size and scale of the one that was finally passed. But the reason we were able to successfully program all of the dollars quickly with the Executive Council in December, once the bill passed, was because we'd already assumed a certain amount of increase, that we weren't, after the public hearing process, suddenly having to accelerate a lot of projects and add new money. We had already anticipated a significant increase. Actually, there was a 24% increase in our core programs, and that we had anticipated. We knew that language was going to make it into any infrastructure bill. And so that's why this has actually been a fairly quiet 10-year plan process. Despite the fact we have all this additional capacity, having already included those dollars in the draft plan, when we were seeking public input, it was really to endorse that those were the right strategies and the right projects to increase the scope for and so on, rather than a lot of individuals advocating late in the process for additional work to be added. So the timing of this really couldn't have been better in terms of the passage of the bill and where we were at in terms of it being a 10-year plan year and the preparation that we had been doing with GASSET.
Okay, moving on to slide 5. Really a hearing and survey summary slide. So as I mentioned, we had 23 public hearings across the state. 22 of them were in person. Many of those also had a virtual component to them. We had one all virtual hearing. So we were able to get a number of comments, wide-ranging comments across the state from very and this chart here, these two charts really show you the level of commentary based on some major categories. So the online survey, we did have an online survey. It's the second update in a row that we've done that. And we received around a little over 700 responses to that survey. And also, we've categorized many of the comments that were received at the hearing. And we received 450 or so comments at the hearing, not only in person but also written. And overall, there was strong advocacy for expanding travel options, so multimodal investment, to improve, have projects to improve safety, maintain the system, and reduce congestion. And there were also a lot of comments about specific needs from a project standpoint, so that we received some of those commentaries and made recommendations to GASSET in order to address some of the comments. No, that includes across all modes. So it would be in all active transportation, along with we had a lot of commentary on transit and those things. So, but yeah, that would include bicycles and pedestrians and safety concerns surrounding them. Okay, page 6. So we put this table together to really explain the increase in funding and try to draw some parallels to where we are in the current federal authorization, in the current 10-year plan. So again, this is the bipartisan infrastructure law funding categories of the IIJA. The first column, and again, the reauthorization was from 2022 through 2026. Our 10-year plan is covering years 23 through 32. So this really covers first 4 years, but it's a 5-year funding plan. And we'll go through the columns first. So the bill, or the IIJA, is the first column to the left. The next column is the 5-year of appropriations that covered the current 10-year plan. So again, there's in the IIJA on the transportation side, $1.56 billion as compared to the current federal authorization bill of just over $1 billion. So the increase, the new money, is $545 million.
So for those of you who were involved in the development of the last 10-year plan, the federal funding bill that we were working under at that time was the FAST Act. The FAST Act we knew was going to expire, and so to constrain the 10-year plan for 2021 to 2030, that's the one that we're currently working under until this bill is passed, we had assumed level federal funding. And so that's what Pete's describing. Basically, we'd assumed for the same period that the IIJA now covers, around $1 billion in the current 10-year plan that we're working under. And so that's why we are talking about only a new money of $545 million, because our current 10-year plan assumed level funding. And so the IIJA covers us for 2020 to 26. What we have done in the development of this 10-year plan is use the actual numbers through 2026 and then assumed level funding in the core programs into the future. And Pete's about to talk about it. Some of the programs are one-time programs, so we did not assume they would continue, we've only assumed that the core programs will continue when the IIJA expires and the next reauthorization replaces it. So we talk about this being a financially constrained 10-year plan, but it's based on those assumptions of level federal funding at the conclusion of the current authorization.
Thank you. Outline the new money between the two bills, FAST Act and the IIJA. $224 million on the highway programs. There's $225 million, and that's a 5-year total, and that's the money that was provided for the bridge program above and beyond our regular appropriations for the 5 years. There's a EV charging appropriation for a little over $17 million. Again, that's 5 years of funding for that program. For public transportation, new money, a little over $33 million. And for airports, a little over $45 million in new money. The next column is what we assumed for the draft 10-year plan at this point in time. Initially, we didn't have clarity on the bridge programs, but as we were coming out of the gasset phase, we got clarity on those, and we were able to include the funding for the 5-year program that was clarified and quantified for us as part of the signing of the bill in the draft. So what we've included for funding in this current draft of the 10-year plan is $1.5 billion, $1.14 billion for highway programs, and that's again, that's the appropriation total. $225 million for bridges, and that's over the 5-year period. $17 million for electric vehicle charging, and $116 million in public transportation. The last column are funds that we don't have clarity on yet. The guidance hasn't been provided in the bill, and so this is around $60 million that we don't have included in this current 10-year plan, and covering $15 million for public transportation and a little over $45 million for airports. And as we learn more about that, we'll be able to include that in the plan.
Yeah, so our hope is now that an appropriations package has been passed, we'll get our full allocation of funding into all the subcategories associated with public transportation, and that those tables will be released in the coming weeks. So certainly by the time we conclude the Senate phase, we should be able to program these remaining dollars. On the aeronautics side, we only have 12 airports in New Hampshire that are eligible for federal funding. We'll talk about that in a moment. So it's unlikely we'll have all the specifics on the additional funds for airports, but we're very constrained in how we can use those dollars anyway. The money will likely be distributed by formula, so there's really no decisions for the legislature to make when it comes to how to spend those dollars because of how the programs are structured. So the goal is, by the conclusion of this phase, to have all of the money clearly allocated appropriately, aligned with the guidance that we receive.
There's also $536 million worth of funding towards non-transportation related infrastructure, $100 million for broadband, $418 million for water, and also some for cybersecurity and wildfires. Again, the total overall, the bills is $2.1 billion, including both areas of investments. Moving on to next slide and the one beyond. So this is we've done some of our Color of Money presentation that you've probably seen before. So moving to slide 8. This is a transportation plan covering multi-modes of transportation. And we call this the rainbow chart, and this identifies the investment level by funding category type included in the draft 10-year plan. Beginning.
This is where you might want to look at the larger scale one that we printed for you. It's easier to read than the slide.
Yeah, we've learned our lessons. And it's structured in a way, if we look from the top of the table down, you've got the modes across the top. So you've got the road and bridge mode to the left, starting from Federal Highway, FHWA, to Turnpike R&R, and then other modes to the right, including rail, transit, and airport. Below that, you have the highway-funded segment and the non-highway funded segment. Again, the highway funded works from Federal Highway on the left to other matching funds, and the non-highway funded begins with the Turnpike funds and moves to the right through the airport.
So when we say highway funded, we mean the funds that flow into the state highway fund. So all of our federal funds flow into the state fund, which is why it covers the federal highway programs as well as the state programs such as Betterment and others that Pete will describe. So Turnpike work is most certainly highway work, but those accounts are kept separate. We don't have any of the Turnpike funds flow into the state highway fund.
And so to tag along with that, each one of these categories comes with specific rules for what the funds can be spent on and where it can be spent. And so there's very few variations in that. There are some, but very few. So there's certain places that we can spend the money and what we can spend it on across the board from a funding standpoint. So it's a $4.6 billion plan, and it covers investments across all modes, as I explained. The highway and bridge mode is 83% of the total. 83% of the $4.6 billion is highway and bridge, and that's why many people call this a highway plan, because most of the funding is associated with the highway and bridge mode. And the balance of that for rail, transit, and airports is 17% of the plan. And the federal highway portion on the road and bridge mode is 83% of the highway fund. So it's a large program. It's the largest program that we have, and it's the one that we have some discretion with, which makes up most of the discussions that we have for the 10-year plan. This is where most of the money is in general. And it is fiscally constrained. So that's also captured. The revenue line is also captured at the bottom of the table. And overall, the federal funds really not for operations and maintenance. So this is investments in the system itself, and not for overall operations and maintenance of the system. So the next slide, strategies for highway programs. So these are the strategies that we utilized in changes that we made on the program level in the Gasset phase in the initial draft of the 10-year plan. So we increased the paving investment by $168 million, and the details there I won't go through, but you can see some of that had to do with inflation. I mentioned that we inflated our programs to maintain a buying power. We also increased the state bridge investment by $169 million. Some of that's inflation, but we also had allocated or identified funding around $120 million in the out years of the plan that were not allocated to specific bridges. So we wanted to be able to address poor condition bridges, redless bridges, more timely. So the goal was to try to address bridges by 7 years, 6 to 7 years as they come onto the plan. The next bullet, I mentioned this before, converted Garvey to federal aid. So we had $163 million in Garvey funds in the current 10-year plan, and you net out the debt service that we would need to pay on that, and the net increase overall to the plan is about $58 million. And at that point, we had $54 million or so that we allocated to those underfunded, scope-controlled projects. So we allocated some funds to some projects across the state that needed more funds in order to meet the original purpose and need for the project. We also, going on to slide 10, so the strategy for the bridge program, this is the 5 years of funding that was included, $45 million per year for the bridge program. And we identified 15% of that total $6.75 million that we allocated to municipal programs. So basically doubled the municipal, the state aid bridge program is about $6.8 million plus the match. In this case, this was $6.75 million that we allocated to the municipal programs. And we were able to accelerate a number of bridge projects because of this funding that we directed to those assets, those local assets.
So it's just coincidental. We received a total of $225 million, so that equates to $45 million per year. 15% is $6.7 million, which happens to be close to the $6.8 million that we happen to spend of state funds on municipal bridges. So that's why we're referring to this as doubling the capacity. It's now going to be a mixture of federal funds and state funds, but essentially we'll have twice as much money to put towards municipally owned bridges.
I know you wanted to wait till the end for questions, but when it comes to this, does that mean that you can expand the number of bridges that are red listed that we would normally, because you have a certain amount that you're allowed to work on throughout the year? Will this expand it out?
So the old state aid bridge program had been a first come, first served program. And we had dollars programmed well out into the late 2020s. With this additional capacity of federal funds, we're able to accelerate a number of projects. So there are bridges that are not eligible for the federal program, but are still being accelerated. So if we take a project that was in the state aid bridge program that meets the criteria and allows us to use the federal funds, we can do it sooner. Well, that creates some capacity on the state side, so we're able to move up even some of the state work. So all of those projects will be done sooner, and that's all shown in the change list that we'll walk you through when we conclude the presentation. But we have not added more municipal bridges yet. What we're showing is unallocated dollars, a programmatic amount towards the end of the 10-year plan. The reason for that is we'll need to do a solicitation and give all municipalities an opportunity to submit candidate projects, and we need time to do that. The other thing is, we talked at length with Gasset about this. Traditionally, the state aid bridge program was first come, first serve. That meant that those communities who knew about it often got in even before their bridge was officially on the red list. And we want to make sure that we're treating all communities fairly. So we want to spend some more time between now and the next 10-year plan update, really looking at how we should structure that program and how we can fairly allow all communities to access those dollars. So when we do the next 10-year plan update, that's when we'll be adding hopefully more municipal bridges, and that gives us a couple of years to work with the regional planning commissions and others to come up with a robust way to select projects and make sure that we are spreading the dollars across all the regions.
Thank you.
Quick follow-up on your question was in this program, in the municipal aid program, is the percentage that the state or federal funding goes, is that a fixed percentage, or are you actually increasing the amount per project? So are you decreasing the cost to the municipalities? Do you understand my question?
So there's a couple of things at play here. So I talked about eligibility, first of all. So New Hampshire defines a bridge differently from the federal government. Any bridge that's over 20 feet in span is eligible for federal funds. So we have projects in the state aid bridge program that don't meet the definition of a bridge from a federal perspective. So what Pete and his team have done is go through all the projects, and Glenn's been verifying all the numbers with the folks in planning. And those bridges that we believe are eligible for the federal program, we're moving them into that program. Those projects will be 100% federally funded. There will be no match component. However, they will now be subject to federal requirements, which means a little bit more oversight and scrutiny as you're advancing the design and then proceeding with the construction. So, of course, there's more federal strings with federal funds, but on the positive side, there won't be a local match required. For those projects that stay in the state aid bridge program, there will be the traditional 80% state funds with a 20% local match. But many of the projects that are in the state aid bridge program, we cannot move them into the federal program because of this different definition of a bridge, or they're too far along. And when you're using federal dollars, everything has to be approved by federal highway before you start spending money. And so there are projects where we're just further along in the process, dollars have been spent, so it's too late to federalize them. So for every community where we thought we could get it into the program, some are going to really want to be in the federal aid program because it won't require that local contribution. Others, not being able to have latitude to do things the way that you would like to in your community and having to follow those federal regs can be cumbersome. So there's different feelings when it comes to whether or not you would like to be participating in the dedicated federal bridge program. But we've done our best to make sure that we have the right projects in the right categories based on the criteria.
Thank you.
And we're working with each community now to help them understand how we think we're going to fund their project in light of all of this and what it means for them as a community.
Thank you.
So the balance of the $45 million, or around $38 million per year in bridge funds, we allocated to existing bridge projects in order to free up more flexible funds for other uses. And we also this is where we pulled in the we upscaled the programs based on the apportionment changes that we knew were going to happen. So that took about $7.3 million. The rest of it went to bridges, and again, that freed up funds, more flexible funds that could be used elsewhere through the program. Page 11. This graphic shows the level of investment in orange for the existing 10-year plan through the years of 2023 through 2030. And the blue bar is the investment level included in the draft 10-year plan from 2023 through 2032. Some of the other areas, so you can see that the green line in the lower line there at 183 million, that's the level of apportionment that we constrained the current 10-year plan to, and that compared to the what we had mentioned was around $228 million per year for an apportionment in the IIJA, so 24% increase. So it increases from 223 in 2023 to around 237 in 2026, and from there out we level funded from a constraint purpose. Okay, and the increases in the first 5 years, that's the 5-year of funding, the $225 million plus the electric vehicle charging that's included here. That's why it's shown as additional investments above and beyond our apportion levels. So that's the difference that you're seeing there. But graphically, you can see the increase in the program overall based on the bars on an annual basis.
So the bridge program and the EV charging program, those are one-time programs funded from the general fund at the federal level. So we can't assume they're going to continue into the future. The other funds, what we call the highway program, but really it's all of our federal aid programs, That's where we've seen the 24% increase. We've assumed then that level funding into the future, that increase would be realized in subsequent bills, because in every circumstance, we've seen at least level funding in the next surface transportation bill.
So I just, so on this chart, the orange is where currently, if we didn't get any federal funds, that's,
If we had just been level funded,
Right.
yeah. If the
And-
FAST Act had been replaced with a bill with just pure level funding, this is where we would have been at.
and with the blue line, that's with the federal grant, or federal dollars.
Yeah, you
Okay.
see the first 5 years where you have the one-time money, it's much more, and then it goes down to a more modest delta in the subsequent years.
Thank you.
Moving into some of the programs, and this is where the rainbow chart, the larger scale rainbow chart, you can walk through. We're going to move from the right side in the beginning with the airport to the left through the program. So the airport funding, total of $382 million programmed in the current draft. Funding's primarily Federal Aviation Administration, grants-based. There's some formula apportionment also. And the funding's restricted for planning, studies, preservation, modernization, or expansion of the eligible airport facilities that the Commissioner mentioned previously. And the funding can't be transferred to other uses. Moving to the next slide, transit funding. Again, moving left in the graph, total of $378 million programmed. Again, Federal Transit Administration funding. It's restricted for transit services, both capital, operating, and planning, and funding cannot be transferred to other uses. And the graphic on the right shows you some of the transit services that are identified and funded through the program. On the next slide, slide 14, these are the different transit funding categories that we have, 5307, 5310, 5311, and 5339. It's the program name, what it's used for, and who receives the funding. And I won't get into the details, but these are all included within the draft 10-year plan as programs, and it focuses on specific areas of the transit need.
So when we showed you the dollars that were unprogrammed in the current draft 10-year plan before you, it's these tables that we're waiting for. We want to see the splits, how much specifically is going to 5307, 5310, and then we'll adjust the 10-year plan. So we know some of this is census-based, and with the census data only being available and analyzed now, we're still waiting for the specific amounts in each of these categories.
Slide 15, rail funding, total of $10.6 million programmed in the draft. There was some special railroad funding, which is approximately $600,000 per year. It comes from lease agreements with private rail operators for use on state-owned rail corridors. There's also railroad revolving loan fund, $1.5 million every 3 years. It's a state-bonded program for capital work on Class 3 and COG railroads. Again, only $10.6 million in the plan for railroads. Some of the new programs, we go to slide 16, electric vehicle charging, public transportation, airports, and active transportation. So electric vehicle charging, again, $17 million one-time money, $3.5 million per year for 5 years. We've begun our electric vehicle program. We've got a point person assigned to DOT, and then we're developing our plan. In this case, it's due in August, and we need that plan in place before we can spend any of that electric vehicle, those funds. Public transportation, $33.5 million. It's across, again, the various FTA programs that are not known. We mentioned this previously. And $15 million of this total is not included in the draft. So again, that translates to the original table that we had that showed the differences between the FAST Act and the IIJA. Airports, $45.6 million is anticipated. And FEA projects not part of the surface transportation. These are new funds, and they're not included in the draft 10-year plan at this point in time. And we also identified.
You have airport funding back on page 12 and airport funding on 16. What's the difference between the two? Are they additive?
So the FAST Act was the Surface Transportation Authorization. So as the name suggests, surface transportation does not include air. So when the FAST Act expired, that was then used as the vehicle for the broader infrastructure bill. So there was additional money provided for airports, as Pete had shared in the table that shows the breakdown of all the IIJA funds. So the 382 million is based on our assumptions around what aviation authorization legislation will provide. And then what was in the bipartisan infrastructure law was truly additional money for airports. And then actually, in the appropriations bill that was just passed, there was also some earmarks for airports. So we'll have another handful of modifications to make to the 10-year plan to reflect some of the funding that came through appropriations. So we'll, in aggregate, I don't have the numbers from the appropriations bill of earmarks. We're probably looking at another 20 million or so in what was in the appropriations bill?
I think like Manchester got like 10 million, and there was about $500,000 for like Newport, so I
Yeah.
think it was
12 million?
yeah.
So yes, if we got 12 million appropriations package, we got 45 million through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then we have our regular 382 million. So that gives you a sense of the size of the program.
It seems like a lot of money for a state with 11 airports. Or does it go quickly?
It goes quickly. We also received COVID relief money, and so the balances from the COVID relief funds are also programmed in the 10-year plan. A lot of the CARES Act money is now spent, but the subsequent relief packages, the CRISA, as well as the American Rescue Plan dollars were made available to several of the modes of transportation, and we have those balances here too. But there's three commercial airports in New Hampshire: Manchester, Boston Regional Airport, Pease, of course, and Lebanon. And so the vast majority of the money does go to the three commercial airports, and then much smaller amounts by formula go to the other airports that are eligible for federal funds.
The last bullet here, active transportation. We receive a lot of commentary on active transportation. That's investments in non-car-centric roadway elements, shoulders, sidewalks, paths, trails, those types of investments. And so what we've done in this plan is we have another table that's in the plan, and it's a investment by category. And we created a new category so we could begin to track and become more transparent in how we spend for active transportation. And we're showing around $17 million per year on average of an investment for active transportation across all of our programs.
So yeah, we don't have specific active transportation projects unless they're funded through one of the federal programs like Transportation Alternatives, which is for that purpose. We've tried to make the case that as we design any project, even a simple resurfacing project, there might be an opportunity to widen shoulders and change lane widths and benefit bicycles and pedestrians. There was criticism during previous 10-year plan cycles that we weren't spending enough on active transportation because we didn't articulate that it was really a component of all of the work that we do today. So that's why you'll not see it in the rainbow chart. They're not special projects necessarily, but we're starting to track how much we're spending on the types of improvement through all the roadway work. Yes.
on to the next slide, slide 17, Turnpike programs. So the two areas that we're identifying here, the Turnpike renewal and replacement program, about $15.4 million per year, and that's used to preserve, maintain, and upgrade existing Turnpike infrastructure. And it's around $7 million on resurfacing, and the balance goes to bridge painting and bridge rehabilitation work. It's required as part of the bond covenants overall. And the bigger portion of that we've discussed through the hearing process is the capital projects. These are the larger scale projects, and because of the revenue reductions that and the projections that we have, all of the capital projects have received some level of delay. And so we've listed the capital projects here and the overall delays in those projects from a construction standpoint. And they're listed all here. We can go through them individually if you like, but each one is showing multiple years of delays, some more than others.
So our revenue projections are significantly lower because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, when we had the full stay-at-home order, and then as things flexed open and we were under safer at home, many companies went fully remote. So we just saw a significant reduction in traffic volumes along the entire Turnpike network. Gradually, the traffic has come back. The travel and tourism industry is thriving, so we're seeing great numbers on the weekends with visitors coming into the state. But everyday commuting still isn't back to what it once was. Even as businesses have reopened again, many employers are continuing to offer telework or flexible work to employees because it's mutually beneficial in some cases in terms of efficiency and operations. And so that's why we're still projecting lower revenue levels than we were during the last 10-year plan. And this is just the consequence. We have to keep the system in a good state of repair. As Pete said, we have bonded the construction of pieces of the Turnpike, so we have a responsibility to the bondholders to maintain the condition. And so what gets pushed out is those bigger capital improvement type projects. And that's unfortunately what we've had to do to make sure that we are realistic around the anticipated revenue from the Turnpike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If revenues pick up, can you make adjustments in this before the next 10-year plan in 2 years?
Yes. So we treat the 10-year plan as our work plan, and we honor the priorities that are established in the plan, but we make it very clear to the legislature that should we have additional funds, we will work to accelerate projects. So we also apply for discretionary grants. If we were to receive a federal grant for a project and that frees up money, we'll look at the next highest priority project that's eligible for that category of funding and try and do it sooner. So we're never going to add a project that was not authorized through the 10-year plan. We're always just going to work to do things sooner should there be additional dollars available, within the categories, of course.
So another question, and maybe I don't understand Garvey bonds well enough, but since we have, in essence, freed up 50 million or so of capacity by paying for the federal funding, could we use that Garvey bonding capacity for any of these projects?
We would not want to issue Garvey bonds. Garvey bonds are federal bonds, and because then you'd be federalizing work on the Turnpike system.
I thought that was the case, but I just...
Yes, so we
Okay.
sell different types of bonds to fund the Turnpike work.
That's just what I couldn't remember, now you told me.
Yeah, Garvey is a particular federal
Thank you.
bond program.
And we've also mentioned here that there are two all-electronic tolling projects. One is under construction currently, the Dover Rochester project, and Bedford included in this 10-year plan that is still in the development process. Next slide. On the further state funding programs, we have both Betterment and SB 367 funding, and these new revenue numbers here reflect the lower revenue projections based on the most recent budget adjustments that were made through pandemic, and people are driving less, spending less money on gas. So on the betterment side, 3 cents of the state gas tax goes to the betterment fund. It's approximately $22.5 million per year. The first, right off the top, 12% goes to state block grant aid to the municipalities, followed by district resurfacing program, 13 million, bridge and drainage repairs, approximately $2.5 million, and there's also some emergency repairs and discretionary force account work included in the betterment, total of $4.5 million, approximately $22.5 million per year. For SB 367, 4-cent state gas tax that was initiated back in 2014, again to pay for $200 million in loans in order to finish I-93 Salem to Manchester. So that's around $32 million per year that's collected. Again, first 12% goes to block grant aid, $3 million. Next flows into debt service for those notes, a $200 million loan, which is interest only through 2025, $2.2 million per year, and 2026 through 2034, when those bonds are, when the TIFIA notes paid off, it increases to include principal and interest, total of $23.4 million per year. Money then goes to state bridge aid program for municipal bridges. It stays constant at $6.8 million through 2025, and then due to the revenue reductions in the projections there, it moves from $4.9 million in 2026 to $3.3 million by 2032. Again, so it's taking a bite out of the state aid bridge program. And also, the last bullet here, so by delaying the principal payments on that note, we're able to invest in rural roads and bridges. So the TIFIA pledge for paving in redless bridges was around $20 million through 2025. And so this is the money that goes directly to, in 2026, goes to pay the principal. So we deferred the principal, we're investing in rural roads and bridges in rural areas, and beyond 2025, that funding goes away for those assets.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm channeling Norm Major here. Does that reduction in revenue projection for the betterment include projected declines due to EV adoption?
So if you turn to the next slide, slide 19,
Yeah.
This shows you the full waterfall.
Right.
So you'll see through 2019, we'd been collecting roughly 36 million in annual revenue that was dedicated to SB 367. During the pandemic, our actual revenue dropped significantly. And then as you look to the out years, we actually had hired a consulting firm, Cambridge Systematics, to develop a report and help us forecast what the revenue was going to be into the future based on increasing fuel efficiency. And so the numbers that are being used here are those that came out of that report. So Department of Safety collects the revenue, just to emphasize that DOT does not collect the revenue, but through the budget process, we work closely with them to understand what the near-term projections are going to be for the next biennium. And then we've done this study to better understand what the revenue might be in the out years. Now, of course, more recently, with the federal government investing significantly in EV charging, and now a number of the automakers increasing their pledge to deliver either plug-in hybrid or fully electric vehicles much more quickly than maybe was first anticipated, it's likely that we need to go back and revisit these projections.
If I may just interrupt for a second on that, is that it seemed to me that your calculations were based on fuel efficiency based on what the EPA was, requiring, but that there's something new that's like going to kick in pretty hard in, 5, 6 years pretty seriously.
Well, you have to remember that the average vehicle on the road today is probably between 10 and 12 years
Yeah.
old. So it will take some time.
Right.
So while you have automakers pledging, in some cases very aggressively, to produce nothing but, full battery electric vehicles by 2030, it could be then 10 more years before the
Yeah,
fleet turns
for
over.
sure.
So yeah, we certainly want to take another look
Yeah,
at
that's
the
what I just-
report
I
that
mean,
was
this doesn't
done
reflect
and
that, so,
update it
okay.
based on some newer projections. With the Biden administration and then Congress passing this bill and providing so much more incentive for individuals to purchase more fuel-efficient vehicles, we are very concerned that our buying power will be further eroded because costs are going up, and then further to that, we're going to see a reduction in revenue. So next 10-year plan, I think there'll be a lot of analysis done to make sure that we are using realistic revenue projections.
Thank you very much.
So this waterfall chart really shows the numbers and how they change by year, what I explained in the previous. So again, the revenue collected by year, first 12% goes to municipal block grant aid, and then debt service costs. You note that it went from 2.2 million in 2025 to 23.4 million. Again, we had deferred principal payments early on so that we could invest in the far second to last column to the right, that TIFIA pledge. So that's where the principal funds went to. And then it goes to state aid bridge program, again, 6.8 million, but based on the revenue collected, the state aid bridge program takes a hit overall, and it's reduced from 6.8 million to, by the end of the 2032, to $3.3 million. And again, that same timeline, the investment in rural roads and bridges ends, and that's clearly shown here in the TIFIA pledge with the red circle.
So what we're trying to point out with the last two columns is, essentially we've been able to do twice as much betterment work with the dollars that were available from SB 367. Once we start to pay back that principal on the TIFIA loan, then we go back to just relying on the core betterment program.
Next slide, a little bit of some of the outcomes of our investment overall, and this really shows for the most recent 4 years of the 10-year plan updates from 17 to 26 to the current 23 through 32 by tier. So tier 1 are the interstates and high volume roads, progressively down to tier 4, the more local, lower volume roads. And what you see over this is that we've made improvements each and every cycle in the overall roadway condition. So this shows condition of roads on the network by tier, good, fair, and poor. And for the majority over the last 4 cycles, we've improved road conditions considerably, and we've improved the number of roads in good condition, and we've decreased the mileage of roads in poor condition. And we've set some targets, and the bullets below kind of show where we are with respect to those targets. And in all cases, but tier 4, we made improvements since the last 10-year plan cycle. In tier 4, they're 62% in good or fair condition. Our target is 65%, and that's down 2% from the last 10-year plan. So that's one of those areas that is going to see additional reductions in ride quality, and conditions are going to degrade because that's where most of the state funds go that were on the rural roads. It's tier 3 and tier 4 roads, mostly on tier 4. And so the level of investment on tier 4 is going to go down as a result of those funds, that $20 million going to pay principal on the SB 367 TIFIA note.
So, this is really a good news story. This shows how the department's been able to pursue additional federal dollars. We've committed that to paving, so we've seen further improvements in the Tier 1 and 2 roads that qualify for federal funds. This is showing you how SB 367 made a tremendous difference, and we actually have improved the condition of the rural roads that don't typically qualify for federal funds. The exposure here and what we'll need to talk about in the next 10-year plan update is what happens when we start to pay back that principal on the TIFIA loan, because we can't use federal funds on these particular roadways. And so right now, it's just the Tier 4 that we see this minor decrease in condition on, but all of this improvement is because the legislature provided the additional state dollars as well as the federal funds coming from Congress to tackle all the different aspects of the system.
And even though we had an increase overall for paving investment, one of the slides, again, federal funds go to federally eligible roads, and many of those roads are not on Tier 4. None of them are on Tier 4. And so that's where the adjustment really is necessary, because even though we are investing more, we can only invest those funds on federally eligible roads, which Tier 4 are not.
So the money that we have that we're using, the new dollars from the feds in the IIJA, that money, can we use the money the state money that we're not using? Can that go towards well, I won't say we're not using, because we're using all of it and then some, but is some of that money going to be used to that state money going to be used to try and upgrade the Tier 4? No?
As you saw, our state revenues have been declining. During the pandemic, there was a significant reduction, and now with ongoing fuel efficiency, we're not increasing the state revenues to have that impact. And so the additional federal funds, we can use them for what we call off-system bridges. That was the conversation we had about the municipal bridges, but you cannot use them for off-system roadway work. So there's no federal funds that can be used, and there's
Right.
just not enough state funds.
But where we're pulling the federal funds in to do some of the work for the roads and bridges that are acceptable to the feds, the money that we're not going to be using on those, the state money, can that be moved over?
So the only work that we have taken that would have been state funded and federalized is bridge work.
Okay.
So if you wanted to do that, then you'd be reducing the size of the state aid bridge program to make the money available for paving instead,
Okay.
which would be then a change to the statute concerning how the waterfall works with the SB 367 funds.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the only switch we're making, is we're taking state-funded bridge work and federalizing that. So we really do have a need to invest in the municipally owned bridges. While we watch our own red list number, we know that the municipalities are struggling to make the investments that they need to on the assets that they own. It's harder for us to project the future red list number on the municipal side because we don't know
Right.
through warrant articles and through the budgeting process, how much they're going to be investing. But we hear time and time again that they really would appreciate more assistance from the state.
Okay, thank you.
I know we're at 2:10 here, so we're got a few minutes here, and we got a couple more slides. And I can go through these pretty quickly to give you the essence of the information. The next, again, is a look at the road and bridge condition projections over the 10-year plan. The top graphic shows miles paved by year. To the left of black is what we actually pave, and the blue is the predicted mileage based on the level of investment that we have in the 10-year plan. And it shows a reduction in miles paved, and a lot of that is because the biggest bang that we get for the buck is on the local roads. The money goes farther because they're generally narrower, and there's less work. That's basically it. You can pave more for more mileage for less amount, and that's where we're losing the revenues. So overall, paving miles decreased through the draft 10-year plan, as I mentioned. However, overall, the next 4 years, we are in really good shape from a paving standpoint, road surface standpoint. Expected to maintain at around 80% go to fair, and that's some of the best road conditions that we've had in a long time. So that's the good story. Again, we predict that conditions in the later years are expected to decline by 30% to 50% go to fair. Right now, we're at 80% go to fair. We expect it to go down to 50% go to fair. And the tier 3 and 4 roads is where the most reductions are. On the bridge side, we expect, this is a number of poor condition bridges or red list bridges on the state system. Again, our projections are shown in blue. We anticipate driving that number down because of the level of investment that we have. Currently, we're at 118 bridges on the red list, and with the investment level that we have in this 10-year plan, we expect that to be driven down to 91 bridges on the red list. So our programs are working, our maintenance and preservation effort is working, and continued investment is a good story.
And this also shows you the difference that the dedicated federal funds will make. The red dashed line is what we were projecting for the red list number at the end of the 10-year plan period when we were looking at the years 19 through 30. So we're bringing that number down significantly with the additional federal funds.
You want me to continue? Everybody has time to continue?
Quickly.
Yeah, quickly.
The
2:15 is our first bill.
what's that?
2:15 is supposed to be our,
2 o'clock, isn't it?
Just, I can list, these are projects that we had lots of discussion on during the GASSET process, and identifies the project, whether they were included in this draft, whether there was a change made through the process for inclusion of the project or not. And so lots of input on the Portsmouth Sound Walls. That project is included in the draft, and it's funded in 23 and 24 using federal funds. Hudson Circumferential Highway is included in the draft as a planning study, but originally it wasn't included in the draft. Golf Links Road and the Balsams, Dixville, Colebrook, not included in this draft. And some of the others are more inclusive overall, but it's worth identifying these and just for information purposes.
Yeah, and this is really a heads up that some of these items might be brought before you when you have the hearing on the bill.
The list that you have in the next page here, 23, is really the list of bridges that we accelerated with the additional bridge money. There are 29 bridges that were accelerated, and these are the bridges overall. These are the projects that are listed in the House amendment also, but this is what we were able to accelerate with that additional dedicated bridge money, $6.75 million overall, so 29 in total. The final slide really identifies the amendments through the House. The one amendment was to transfer ownership of the state-owned portion of Continental Boulevard in Merrimack to the town. The amendment that I mentioned previously was to restore the Hudson 42108 to the draft, and basically it's a feasibility study. We identified $1 million in 24 and 25 total. And that list of bridges that I had shown you previously is we're funding municipal-owned bridges with state aid bridge, Mobridge, and mobile programs to meet the accelerated schedules and eligibilities.
So really, coming out of the GASSET phase, the governor made no changes to the plan. The last item, the bridge guidance was released, so we had already committed to accelerating the municipal work in the GASSET phase, but we didn't know exactly how each project would be funded. We had that clarity, so that last item wasn't really a change. It was more just tightening up the source of funds for something that Gasset had already intended to do. So the other two items are the two minor changes that the House made to the 10-year plan.
Any questions from the committee?
I just asked Wes, I mean, we're going to have the hearing on 2022 anyways, but one thing I did want to ask is that the funding for intermodal transportation, does that include any needs for the intermodal transportation which may be included in the proposed train stations for the Manchester-Boston route? I see Bill nodding his head no.
Are you referring to the Capital Corridor project?
No, the train. Oh, yeah, that is,
The,
yeah,
the
I'm
train,
sorry.
the rail project? Okay, so, the department is currently advancing the project development phase of the
Right.
Capital Corridor Rail project. So while it is a passenger rail, project, it is actually funded with a Federal Transit Administration, source of funds, not with rail funds. That's one of the things that confuses, some of the constituents. So it's an FTA-funded project. We are currently completing that work now. The forecast is to have the final financial plan and the design work complete by early 2023. So there's no subsequent phase or additional capital corridor project in this draft 10-year plan. Currently, we anticipate finishing that project development work, and then there's nothing else funded at
Yeah,
this time.
Thank you. I kind of knew that, but I was just asking because, I heard from a certain bus company constituent in my area, that, the concern about, as that planning was being done for that, to include more planning for intermodal with the bus lines, and that might in fact end up requiring some expenditures. But that, I guess it sounds to me like that was what we'll be talking about after 2023.
Yeah, so
And I think
currently.
there's also one, I heard from one municipality about there's one crossing that if it were developed, they'd have to change the crossing they use for their sewer lines, and that was gonna cost some money, so I'm sure you know about that too.
Yeah, so currently, we're using what's called Boston Urbanized Area 5307 funding for the project development phase. You could continue drawing on that source of funds for future work on passenger rail, assuming that we're looking at a commuter rail option. If for some reason the state moved away from commuter rail and that frequency of service and was looking at what's called intercity rail, which is more similar to what the Downeaster or the Vermonter provides, then that would be an intercity rail project which would be funded in a different way. So those are some of the things that we are outlining and discussing as we complete this project development phase, is what would be the suitable and acceptable sources of revenue to pay for the rail project, should the state believe it's the right thing to move forward with.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I just want to thank you all for coming. It was enlightening, and I always enjoy seeing it ahead of time, just to get your perspective.
Just mention that all the content is posted on our website, and if you Google NHDOT 10-year plan, you'll find it
Okay.
right at the top of the 10-year plan website. So.
Great.
We have all the materials posted from every phase of the process, every meeting that was held, so you can go back and look at all the history.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, seeing that we're a little bit late, I will start the hearing on House Bill 1038 with the prime sponsor. Come forward. Welcome to Senate Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for the record. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. For the record, I'm Gary Woods, representative for Merrimack 23, serving Bowen Dunbarton. I'm here to introduce House Bill 1038. I'll be quite brief to get you back on schedule. This is regarding naming a bridge in Londonderry in honor of Robert J. Prouse. And you say, if it's in Londonderry, why am I in Bow sponsoring the bill? Robert J. Prouse's daughter-in-law is my next-door neighbor. And being a retired orthopedic surgeon, I took care of the family when I was in practice. I'm retired. So I knew that family quite well. So when the bridge, when 93 was modified, the original bridge, the Robert J. Prouse Bridge, was removed and taken to Keene. And they're using it for a footbridge. The bridge was modified, and the Department of Transportation contacted Ms. Prouse, my neighbor, and said that they would, if she would be so inclined, get a legislator to help her, and they would be supportive of naming the new bridge over the modified 93 as a Robert J. Prouse Bridge. I'll hand this out. This is a very short biographical sketch of him. He's a Concord native. Was internationally known for his bridge design and bridge building technique. He had quite a number of bridges, well over 400. I think there was 180 bridges just in New Hampshire in the course of his span at the Department of Highway here in New Hampshire. The bridge is over was called the Ash Street Bridge, and it's just north of exit 4 on 93. And again, this is a courtesy to the family to try and attach the name to a Concord native and an internationally known bridge builder. And with that, I'll stop there. And if there's any questions, there have been letters which I think should have been passed over from the House relative to the cities. I contacted both Derry and Londonderry, and they had no plans to change the name in any other way and supported this measure. So I didn't realize at the time, but I was informed by Representative Baldassaro that I needed to get some letters, so I did.
Just any questions from the committee? I just have one question. There is an amendment, and I think that is going to be, wants to add to naming a bridge in Londonderry in honor of Robert J. Prouse and a bridge in Portsmouth in honor of Staff Sergeant Jesse Sherrill. Is that?
It's fine, as far as that's perfectly fine. It's just.
All right. Any other questions? Any questions? Seeing none? Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Senator, did you want to speak on your amendment? Just briefly, I would. Okay, come on down.
Good afternoon to the committee. For the record, my name is Harold French, Senator of District 7. I'm here to propose an amendment to House Bill 1038. This amendment would, as the chair said, would name bridge number 19 in the city of Portsmouth after Staff Sergeant Jesse Sherrill, who, as you all know, died in the line of duty this year. As we all know, in this world, we die twice. We die when our soul leaves our body, and the day we die again when the last day our name is ever mentioned. And this would help prolong that last death by honoring him and his family in this way. So I'd like you to take and consider adding this to the amendment, as an amendment. Thank you very much.
Any questions from the committee?
Where's he from? Barrington?
Barrington,
Thanks.
Thanks for bringing this forward.
thank you.
All right. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on House Bill 1038 that has, sure?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joe Ebert. It's E-B-E-R-T, and I'm a major with the New Hampshire State Police. I know you're time restricted and running a little behind schedule, so I'll keep this short, but having known Jesse for the entirety of my career, nearly 20 years, I wanted to take a moment, first to thank Senator French for putting this amendment forward, but also to give you just a quick snapshot of who Jesse was. I tell everyone I talk to about him that he was the ultimate in everything you look for in a trooper, but he was even better at being a husband and a father. Just a tremendous individual. When you're a trooper, you have a very solitary kind of daily interaction. Your interaction with the public is usually not for a good reason, and your interaction with your fellow troopers is sparse because there are often, especially when you're assigned up north, as both Jesse and I were at the same time to the northernmost barracks, your next closest trooper may be 30, 60, 80 miles away. So when you get car to car and you roll down the window, there's a tendency to take that period of time to really download everything that's bothered you for the past week when you hadn't seen anybody else who was your coworker, and to really kind of hash out the things that you think, oh, this could be changed, this could be better. What always stood out to me about Jesse was he never did that. He never engaged in that negativity. He never let himself be brought down, and instead he was the epitome of what you look for in a state employee, because he was somebody who would consistently tell you how lucky he was to have the job he had, how lucky he was to have the income he had to be able to provide for his family, and the opportunities that the job had provided for him. So to me, the notion of dedicating a bridge to him, in particular in an area where so many of us travel by it on a regular basis, would not only be a reminder to those of us who knew him, what a tremendous individual he was and what to aspire to be, but would also be, I think, a good reminder for anyone visiting our state and traveling up 95 or down for that matter, as to exactly what a good person is. He was everything that we would want to be a representative of the state of New Hampshire to be. So having said that, I thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about him today. And for considering this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions from the committee?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on 1038? I am. With that, I'll close the hearing, and do I hear a motion to go in? Okay.
I'll move 1038 ought to pass,
Second,
and I'll move amendment
1150, yeah.
1150S ought to pass.
I'll second. All right, so it's ought to pass as amended.
We have to pass the amendment first.
Yep. All those in favor of the amendment 1150S, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Ought to pass as amended.
Ought to pass as amended. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
We're going to keep this off consent, right? Or do
Yeah.
you want it on, say some words about,
I think we should,
right?
so,
Be glad to take it out if you'd like. It seems like constituent.
okay. Senator Waters will take it out. All set.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Second. All those in favor of moving out of exec, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we will let's see, 2:30. Start the hearing on House Bill 1316 and the prime sponsor.
Strange today.
Thank you. Welcome.
For the record, I am Representative Suzanne Gottling representing Sullivan District 2, Sunapee, and Croydon. And I'm here this afternoon to introduce HB 1316, that New Hampshire establish safety requirements for e-foils. My attention was drawn to this method of propulsion last summer when an apparition went by my front window, an apparently airborne human speeding by as if by magic. It wasn't magic, but a gentleman on an e-foil, traveling as fast as a motorboat while standing on a small board suspended 2 or 3 feet above the water. This caught my attention. Conversations with our local police chief and with the Captain Dunleavy of Marine Patrol provided background on this emerging water sport, and hours on the internet furthered my education. And for your entertainment, so you know what I'm talking about, do you distribute? Thank you. As you can see, an e-foil consists of a 4'4" to 6'2" board attached to what they call a mast, which you can picture an upside-down sailboat, at the bottom of which is a propeller and a hydrofoil. It's powered by a lithium-ion battery and controlled by a handheld Bluetooth throttle that turns power off if the throttle hits the water or the boarder exceeds a 45-degree tilt. The e-foil rises out of the water by very delicate adjustments of the rider. An e-foil can travel 25 to 30 miles an hour, and its battery lasts from 90 to 120 minutes. It is quiet and makes no wake. How widespread is e-foiling in New Hampshire? Our state is already home to several sales and lesson outlets, and a Laconia company, Hydrocump Inc., designed one of the propellers. In Sunapee last summer, there were several complaints lodged against e-foilers weaving their way in our crowded harbor, and frequent lessons took place in one of our narrowest coves. The letter from the New Hampshire Lakes Advisory Committee further indicates e-foiling is alive and well and growing in New Hampshire. New Hampshire presently classifies the e-foil as a boat, and as you know, boats with motors are required to follow many regulations to keep the boater safe. A boater must have registration decals in the proper place for identification, carry on board his or her registration and boating certificate, as well as a life jacket, paddle, signaling device, and lights for traveling at night. Are these requirements presently followed by e-foilers? Who knows? How many of these are appropriate? What is a penalty for failing to follow boating rules? Should any rules or requirements or penalties be adapted or modified? Some of our neighbors, such as Lake George, has dealt with the problem, has dealt with e-foils, and they allow operation only in daylight hours. Many places require the life jacket to be worn, as there is no attachment of the rider to the board. I am sure the young lady from Marine Patrol, who I have not met yet, but I'm happy to see you, can think of many other issues to examine, but this is my effort to help you understand why HB 1316 is needed.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Enjoy your photos. Has anyone here tried it?
No.
I gather Mark Zuckerberg has done it,
Yeah.
whatever that says.
All right. With that, is there anyone here that would like to speak on 1316 that has not had the opportunity? Sure, come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. For the record, my name is Crystal McLean, and I'm a lieutenant with State Police Marine Patrol. These e-foils, hydrofoils, are a relatively new type of watercraft within the last 3 or 4 years. We have seen them begin to explode in popularity throughout the state. We are receiving numerous phone calls with people asking whether they're allowed on the lakes, rivers, and all the public waters throughout New Hampshire. This bill that's proposed would allow us to create rules to further regulate them, because although they're classified as a boat or a vessel through the U.S. Coast Guard currently, as was testified to, there is some gray area, and allowing us to have these rules established would allow us to better regulate with things such as the possibility of mandatory life jacket wear, similar to a ski craft in New Hampshire. It would also allow for regulating operation hours. Once again, similar to ski craft, not allowing them at night, or water skiing, for instance, is also not allowed after dark for safety reasons, as well as other similar type restrictions. So we do favor, or we do support this proposed legislation, because it will allow us to, once again, regulate and help ensure the safety of the users of this new type of craft.
Okay. Any questions? Senator Waters.
Thank you, and thank you, Lieutenant. So bottom line here, though, is that as a watercraft, they're going to have to be registered.
Yes, they are registered as a vessel currently.
Okay, thank you. And excuse me if I may, are people registering them?
That has also been somewhat of gray area. We did receive clarification from the Coast Guard that they do need to be registered, as well as bow numbers affixed. The Coast Guard is currently evaluating whether those bow numbers need to be the minimum 3-inch height that all of our other vessels have to make. Currently, they still do need to have that, technically on both sides of this electric surfboard, if you will. But these devices are required to be registered. I personally have not seen any come through. However, they are very new within the last couple of years here.
Thank you very much.
Senator Sherman.
Thank you. I don't know if you can answer this, but when somebody falls off the board or turns it off, do they glide for a little bit longer, or do they stop pretty much instantaneously?
I don't know the official answer. What I have seen through some of my research shows that the controller is a Bluetooth type device that they hold in their hand. When they fall and this device is submerged in the water, it cuts the connection to that surfboard, so it stops. It also, from what I've found, says that it stops basically in place. However, you also have that water dynamic. I have not seen it actually in person to be able to answer specifically.
I just have this image of a torpedo, so I'm.
Yes, they do move. The general speed is 25 to 50 miles an hour in some cases.
Wow. Thank you.
Madam Chair? Thank you. How many of these are around now? Do you have any idea?
I don't at this point. They came out in 2017, 2018 in different parts of the world, and they're starting to make their way towards New Hampshire. I know we've had officers who have encountered them on some of the smaller public bodies of water throughout the state, but where it is a somewhat of a gray area right now enforcement-wise, it's been more of the question about what is this and how can we make sure that the users stay safe when they're out on this device.
Follow-up? I'm looking at this thing, and is that a weight limit on the person using it?
There are some dynamics that it actually determines the speed and the amount of battery life that it will have, depending upon the weight of the user and the dynamic of the water, if there's any chop, those types of, the drag, for lack of a better term.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right, any other questions from the committee?
No.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
Anyone else that wants to testify that has not had the opportunity? All right, with that, I will close the hearing on House Bill 1316. And we'll move right into 1562. Clarifying the prohibition on using an electronic or telecommunications device while driving. Who's the prime sponsor? Representative Spillane is not here.
Can we introduce it from here?
Hold on. I thought there was a memo from him.
There is.
Oh,
There he is. Your bill is up. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Representative Stephen Smith, Sullivan 11, Eckworth, Charlestown, Goshen, Langdon, Leominster, and Washington. I'm here to introduce House Bill 1562. Comes to you out of committee unanimously and then onto the House consent calendar. As most of you will recall, we passed a new version of the no texting while driving, which we referred to as the hands-free law. That had a lot of definitions. It was improvement, and the reason we did that, the existing statute, it wasn't that it wasn't being enforced. There were a lot of challenges in getting convictions based on it. So when we passed the new version, which I think is working pretty well, we never got rid of the old one. So that's all this bill does. It's a cleanup one so that we don't have two conflicting statutes. The one that's repealed said simply, a person operating a moving motor vehicle who writes a text message or uses two hands to type on or operate an electronic or telecommunications device is guilty of a violation. A person does not write a text message when he or she reads, selects, or enters a phone number or name in a wireless communications device for the purpose of making a phone call. That was 2010. It made sense then. I'm not going to read the new statute to you because you have other things to do, but when you look at it, you'll see it has better definitions that refer to Bluetooth technology, that's okay, that the law was never intended to stop somebody from talking on a phone. Really, we were concerned with people reading their Facebook messages or playing Fruit Ninja when they should be looking out their windshield. And that's what the new one does. So we believe it's an improvement. The other line in the bill changes a reference to commercial vehicles. It used to point to the old one, you can't violate that, and we updated that to point to the new statute. So literally, we saw it only as a cleanup bill.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions from the committee? No? Seeing none, thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
So I don't see anyone here that wanted to speak. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on 1562 that has not been given the opportunity? All right, with that, I will close the hearing. Sure.
I'll move executive.
Second,
I'll move up to pass on 1562.
I'll second. So it's ought to pass from Senator Waters, seconded by Senator Birdsell. All those in favor of ought to pass, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Consent.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I'll take this one out.
And I'd like to move up to pass on 1316.
I'll second it.
Okay, wait a minute. Senator Waters moves ought to pass on 1316. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Move consent.
Second. All those in favor of consent say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Do you want to do 1571?
Oh, yeah. Senator Richardi, you want to take this out?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah,
Who's taking it out?
Senator Richardi. Did you want to
Okay.
take it out?
No, I'm just.
Marie's gonna.
She's gonna go buy one, yeah.
Marie will get angry with us if we don't. Okay.
Well, moving right along.
571.
571.
Senators, just remember mics.
Oh, I'm sorry, I hadn't had that on. Would you like me to make a motion? Do you want to make it, Madam Chair?
I will make a motion of ought to pass on House Bill 571.
A second.
Any
If I may
discussion?
comment, Madam Chair.
Yep.
So as you know, I had prepared an amendment that tried to clarify the enforcement of local law enforcement of the noise and enforcement of state statutes on noise and speed. And I heard a couple days ago, I had some conversation with some folks in Concord who seemed to think that was a good idea, and then I heard the other day from the city manager communicating for the chief of police that they did not want this enforcement power, and I think we agreed in that phone call that it is probably still an open question as to whether they have it already, but that can be discovered in the fullness of time, as they say. So I think, given that communication from the Concord chief of police, that we can just pass this as it is.
So where are we? Off to pass?
Yes, you had made the motion. Senator Waters seconded the ought to pass.
All those in favor of ought to pass say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do we want consent?
Yo, we better believe it.
I'll second consent, or did you? Senator Richardi seconds. All those in favor of consent say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'll take it out. So moved. I mean, I'll second. All those in favor of moving out of
Aye.
exec say aye.
Aye.
So do you expect this next hearing to go on for a while? We have a bunch of folks here.
I don't know.
I've got some letters. I could go move my car now instead of.
Go ahead.
We have to worry about it. I'll be back in 5 minutes. So.
We're going to recess till about 10 after. Yep. No, to put it on consent. 570.
No, the very last motion was come out of exec.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like fun.
It probably is. All right, I will start the hearing on House Bill 1109 and welcome the prime sponsor, Representative Renzullo. Welcome.
And members of the committee. I'm Andy Renzullo, representing Hillsborough 37, Hudson and Pelham. I'm also the chair of Resources, Recreation, and Development in the House. And I'm here to present the testimony on introduce House Bill 1109, which concerns the approval for off-highway recreational vehicle use on Class 4, 5, and 6 roads. In the recent past, the House Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee has been knee-deep in issues involving off-highway recreational vehicles allowed on public roads, specifically Class 4, 5, and 6. As the law exists now, the municipal administrative body, for example, the Board of Selectmen, may authorize the use of specific Class 4, 5, and 6 roads for use by OHRVs. This bill shifts the authorizing authority from the municipal administrative body to the municipal legislative body, for example, the town meeting. The House Resources Committee heard from residents, primarily from the North Country, but not only from the North Country, complaining of the process of approval for OHRV uses by the Board of Selectmen. We heard stories of meetings being stacked with out-of-towners or poor notification. All this bill does is give the property owners on the affected roads access to a town-wide electorate rather than a 3 or 5 person board. Also, the notification for town meeting items is generally far superior than for a Board of Selectmen's agenda. And finally, this bill does not bypass the Board of Selectmen, as they are the ones who prepare a town warrant for a town meeting and make recommendations. I know there's people behind me who wish to speak, and I'll entertain any questions.
I do have a question. I don't know if you've seen it. There is an amendment.
Yes, I have, and I support it.
Good. That was my question, too.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Peter, can I get the sheet? Natch Grace.
Thank you, Nate Grace for the New Hampshire Municipal Association. So I did submit to the committee a proposed amendment this morning via electronic copy, and I have hard copies I've now provided. We don't have a position as to the policy of whether the legislative body or governing body should open up a road or close a road to OHRV use. But in looking at this bill, we were notified by one of our members that they would like some clarification on when the hearing should occur, notification hearing should occur. So the proposed amendment that's in front of you does delete a portion of a line in Section B and adds a new Section C. And that Section C clarifies that the hearing shall be held at least 14 days before the date of the legislative body meeting in which the action is taken, and then specifies in a traditional town that would be the business session, and in an SB2 town, the deliberative session. And
And then notice of that hearing shall be mailed to abutters by verified mail at least 14 days prior to the hearing. So we were concerned that there might be issues of whether adequate notice would occur if the original bill wasn't amended, and that's why we've submitted this proposed amendment. And I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee? None? Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Parsons. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here today, I work at Rathern Pignatelli. I'm here today on behalf of the New Hampshire Off-Highway Vehicle Association opposed to this bill. At the House hearing, there was 2 members of the public and ourselves who testified. We do agree there have been plenty of people who have come and told stories about the process in the past, and that's why in 2019 the law was changed. Part of the law was changed to make sure that there was duly noticed public hearing advertised at least 14 days in advance and notification given to abutters by verified mail. And that was made to mirror for closing roads as well as opening roads. Before, the process was not quite the same. It was a more cumbersome process for closing the road, and that law has since been changed in 2019. It's been successfully used to close roads in places such as Dummer, New Hampshire, and we have not heard any issues since that law was put into place. Additionally, your committee will hear another bill, House Bill 1188, which is creating a 5-year study commission on OHRV use, because these Class 5, Class 6 issues are very cumbersome issues to delve into, that everyone thought a 5-year commission would be ideal to be able to really look deeply into the issues, instead of, there was one last year that lasted, I think it was the summer, and it wasn't enough time to get into some of these issues. Lastly, we do think the New Hampshire Municipal Association, we saw that amendment, we do think that's an improvement, but we still have concerns about how that process is going to work, the permission process. It's going to take legal counsel for some of these towns to explain to them when they can do a public hearing ahead of some of these town meetings. And it's also reducing the flexibility folks have from being able to open or close a town road throughout the year to they're going to have all their ducks in a row. If it's a city, they're going to have it in the summer before that. And if it's a town meeting, they're going to have it sooner, the fall, when their season isn't until May usually. So for those reasons, we ask either you kill the bill or you find an interim study and let the study commission that you guys will hear deal with that and make sure that all the unintended consequences can be fully examined.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. As Chairman Renzullo said, we've been at these issues for quite a while, and I think that we all celebrate Ride the Wild and what OHRV expansion has done for the North Country, but we also heard a lot in this committee, 3 years ago now, maybe, about the attendant issues about noise and dust and time of day use and so on and so forth. So you say that, what we passed in, was it 591?
Yes, 591, yep.
Seemed to be a procedure that was working, and yet now we have these, this come before us. So could you, kind of characterize or qualify what, how it's been working?
I mean, at the hearing on this bill, there wasn't folks that showed up to testify that it was not working. There was 2 members of the public who testified, but it was more so against OHRV use on town roads in general, more so than the actual process, how it's working. This wasn't like hearings of the past where there have been, tons of people. I'm not aware. There might have been very well, emails sent and whatnot, but.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I was trying to get less at the House hearing.
Yeah.
As to what's actually happening out in the towns where.
Yes, so Dummer
I
is.
mean, have there been, more towns that have voted to open or close these roads,
I wouldn't say there's been more. I think, you know, a lot that were opened, I think, you know, that already happened a while ago. I know certain places like City of Claremont, they yearly ask the clubs to get permission from the landowners again, and they review them. And the town of Dummer actually closed a road to OHRV use last year by this process that's currently in place that requires 14 days notice and verified mail to all abutters currently.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby Evancow? Welcome.
My name is Abby Ivanko from Gorham, New Hampshire. I live a mile from the OHRV trail in Gorham, where 3 OHRV trails converge in a residentially zoned neighborhood, and 7 households are suing the town and state to get those trails removed. So the complaints are very real. I can actually answer Senator Waters' questions about what's happened since 591. 591 left out class 2 and 4 roads, I believe, because since the passage of 591, which requires a butter notification for roads going forward, 5 and 6, I think, Route 16 in Gorham, where there are multiple residential homes, no abutters were opened when that section of State Highway, class 2, was opened to ATV travel. So there are big gaps in abutter notification. And that is one of the amendments I'd like to propose to HB 1108, that the protections of abutter notification be extended to people who live on class 2 roads, because they're being left out right now. And I'd also like to clarify that the Dummer vote to close their town roads to OHRVs was at March's town meeting, and it was a warrant article. And again, HB 809, it's not differentiating between trail roads being opened and closed going forward and roads already open. I would like, HB 1108 should not require a butter notification to close roads that were opened without a butter notification. It puts a penalty on those homeowners who have already been suffering from these trails. They were never notified, and now they have to pass a higher hurdle than was necessary to open the roads. I appreciate Representative Ronzullo's bill. It's important. There's another thing to consider as you're working on OHRV siting legislation. There is a lawsuit in Gorham to have these trails removed, and the court is granting the town and state immunity because I need to look at the language here. It's there's nothing in the law. The three sections of law don't waive sovereign immunity for the state. I need to get the exact language because it's because the OHRV siting statute does not expressly waive immunity for the town or the state or the municipalities or the state in OHRV siting decisions. This judge is giving the town and state immunity. So what needs to be baked into the OHRV siting statutes is that there is no immunity from these statutes when opening the trails. Does that make sense?
I get it, yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, if 1108 had been in place before the Gorham trails were opened in that residential neighborhood, those residents would have had a fighting chance.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Jason Stock. Welcome.
Sure I press the buttons here. Well, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Jason Stock. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify on House Bill 1109. We did sign in support of it while it was in the House Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee. So we did weigh in. Just quick background, our members own or manage about 1 million acres across the state of New Hampshire. Oops, still not used to the mic here. And, you know, for landowners, access to your timberland is a really critical, it's very critical. And Class 6 roads in particular are the means of entry to many, the only means to entry to many woodlots across the state. And, you know, having roads become trails puts an additional stress or strain on that right-of-way that can create further degradation of it, erosion, things of that nature. That, and you have to understand, many of these roads were essentially cart paths, and so they're not highly engineered nor designed roads, and so additional stress on them can really quickly degrade them. And so as a landowner who has property that's only accessed by a Class 6 road, if I lose that access, maybe I don't lose it legally because I can still drive across this right-of-way, but if in a practical sense, if it becomes washed out and rutted, I bear an expense. If I go to access my property to do some management, I have to invest in it, gravel, excavator time, things of that nature. But also it affects the value of the timber. I mean, access is an asset. And when landowners and land managers look at a piece of land, they look at the timber stocking, they look at what, you know, kind of its proximity on the landscape, its slope, et cetera. But one of the first questions you ask is, what is the access to this? How good's the access? What type of road? What's the condition of the road? And to have a road become degraded certainly has an effect on the value of that asset. Since the hearing in the House, I've gotten emails from members expressing concerns about, or expressing support, I should say, for House Bill 1109. And I have a letter I'll provide you from a forester up in the Wentworth area. But again, you know, the concern is that right now, under, as you heard from Chairman Renzullo, the decision falls with the administrative branch of local government. It's the selectmen or city council. And when we looked at this bill as an organization, it really struck us as odd that when you look throughout the road statute, to designate, classify, or decommission a road, or discontinue a road, they all essentially require a vote of the legislative body. To discontinue a road, RSA 231, 43, 45, and 45A. So that's to discontinue a road or have a Class 6 road subject to gates and bars. The only exception I would add is if you have a road that does not see any municipal work for a 5-year period, it can automatically revert to a Class 6 status and at that point become subject to gates and bars. But having said that, there is a petition process. If I'm an affected landowner, if I have land that I say, hey, wait a minute, if this road becomes a Class 6 road that affects the value of my asset, I do have a means to petition to say, all right, I'd like to have that remain a Class 5 road. Although not a true road right-of-way issue, to have a road designated a scenic road, again, vote of the legislative body. To classify a Class 6 road, to take a Class 4 or Class 5, take a Class 6 road and upgrade it to a Class 5 or Class 4 road, RSA 231-22A. Again, vote of the legislative body. And what really struck us is you have two things called Class A and Class B trails. In New Hampshire, a town can designate a road a trail. Class A trails will allow vehicular access. Class B trails prohibit vehicular access. Again, to designate or undesignate those, again, it's a vote of the legislative body. So when we looked at House Bill 1109 in the context of existing statutes, we said, geez, this makes sense. It brings it into alignment with how roads and access are treated in other parts of the road statute. And so we felt that it was appropriate to support this bill. And again, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions. I'm not a roads expert or a roads scholar. But yeah. Don't quit my day job. But roads are a big issue for us. We've been around them. Every spring I get calls from grumpy loggers, grumpy landowners, and grumpy road agents. And, so this is an issue. We've been around it. And we just think that 1109 is an appropriate, it brings it into alignment. We think it should be the vote of the legislative body because that legislative body includes those residents and landowners and the notice provisions, and they actually have a physical voice in the decision. And so for that, we support it. I'll provide a copy of, his name is Jordan King. He's a selectman from Wentworth. I will say he's pretty passionate about this. I did not write his testimony, but he is a member of ours, and he did ask that I provide you a copy of it. And so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the time to come today and testify in front of you.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
That ends the testimony. Is there anyone here that hasn't spoken that would like to on House Bill 1109? Sure. Rich?
Would you mind? Thank you. This is a little outside of the, I know, and again, going back several years, we're kind of this catch between legislative body and a select board and, who's responsive and who isn't or how these things get done. My question goes more to the issue about roads that are open that may go between, transit more than one community.
Okay.
So is there a concern, again, what we try to do with Ride Around and other OHRV routes up there, is there an issue where if one community decided to pull out, that it might kind of mean that those trails are kind of abandoned if there was that gap there?
Potentially, yes. There's the potential unless they can't find another workaround.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. Thank you. With that, I will close the hearing on 1109, and we will not be execing this today. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned.
Good work. Oh, got a lot done today.